Welcome to the Math Ed Podcast. I'm Sam Otten from the University of Missouri, and in this episode, I'm pleased to present a condensed digest version of a new special issue from Education Sciences. The articles from this special issue are all completely open access, and they're being compiled together into a forthcoming book from NDPI as well. The special issue is entitled Incremental and Innovative Approaches to Professional Development for Mathematics Teachers. I edited this special issue with Amber Candela and Xandra de Araujo, and it delves into a topic we've been working on for several years, the idea of doing incremental PD and subtle forms of support with math teachers, instead of, or in addition to, the typical forms of university-based PD that aims toward transformational changes in instruction. This special issue in Education Sciences features 10 articles from various author groups, presenting new ideas and insights into math teacher PD, with incremental approaches as one of the common themes. Although a few of the articles do have transformational goals, but their analysis still sheds light on what or how certain pieces of the transformational change might get taken up incrementally by teachers. In this episode, we're sharing a brief summary of each of the articles, and because they're open access, you can grab any of them that catch your interest and look at the full details. For the audio summaries here, most of the authors were able to record something in their own voice. But it is summer vacation, and so it didn't work out for everyone to be able to record. So in a few instances, I'm going to read their abstract and maybe a few excerpts from the article. And again, you're welcome to download the full articles. Let's begin with a summary of the editorial article that sets the stage for the special issue. This editorial was written by myself with Xandra de Araujo and Amber Candela, drawing on our multi-year National Science Foundation project called Practice-Driven Professional Development, or PDPD. We spoke about this project last year in episode 2405, but I also want to briefly summarize what we laid out in the Education Sciences article. It's entitled, The Benefits of Modesty, Considering Incremental Professional Development for Mathematics Teachers. It begins by making the case that, for decades, many university-based PD efforts for math teachers have been aimed at pretty profound changes in teaching. But this transformational PD, as we call it, has not led to widespread adoption of the kinds of instruction promoted by the PD. There are some pockets of success, as Fran Arbaugh describes them in the next article, but the transformational changes do not seem to spread very easily and haven't spread very widely across math classrooms, at least in the United States. In our editorial, we point out some reasons why the spread hasn't happened, and we connect those reasons not just to the reality of schooling or other external factors. We directly connect the lack of spread to aspects of the transformational PD itself. First of all, we argue that many teachers are simply left out of the transformational PD. Some teachers may opt out because they don't agree with the aims of the PD, and unfortunately these folks would perhaps benefit the most from PD. Or they may opt out because the PD requires them to attend and be involved over a period of time. Or maybe the limited scope and resources of the PD means that it just simply can't be available to all teachers across a district or a county or a state. So for a variety of reasons, the PD will actually only reach a subset of teachers. Moreover, we argue that because the PD has some ambitious goals for instruction and is asking for some big changes in teaching, it is by definition going to be a challenging thing for teachers to pull off. In other words, even for those teachers who do attend the PD, not everyone will successfully incorporate the changes into their teaching. But we can look at the subset of the teachers who do implement the instructional transformations from within that subset of teachers who actually do join the PD. That small subset of teachers will often face backlash from students or parents, or even from other teachers or administrators in their building. Or maybe they find difficulties because of misalignments with the curriculum and assessments to the changes that they're trying to make. So these difficulties can make it really hard to sustain the instructional changes, even if they do take hold a little bit at the start. And last, we comment on spread. If the transformational changes did work out for the few teachers who were directly involved in the PD, it probably means they had the PD support, collegial support, some sort of alignment with curriculum assessment and leadership, and they probably put in a tremendous amount of effort and reflection to bring it all together into an ambitious form of instruction. But how is this going to spread? We argued that it's unsurprising that the transformational changes haven't spread over the decades, because so many things had to come together, and it all takes time and effort to happen at all. It's not easy to pass that sort of thing on to other teachers and other teachers. And even from that certain point of view, that well-known list in the literature of criteria for effective PD, we would say that that can be reinterpreted as a list of things that have to go right in order for transformational PD to work. So from that point of view, it's also kind of a list of reasons that make it unlikely for the changes to spread widely. So our editorial article then shifts to incremental PD as an alternative approach to instructional change. We lay out 3 different types of incremental PD, and we share what I think are some pretty nice figures with a dash of color that depict each of these types. The first type is peace and support incremental PD. And by this we mean that the PD focuses on just one piece of a broader transformational goal. So we depict it as just one small slice of what used to be a big ambitious goal in the previous model of PD. But this type of incremental PD still involves various forms of PD support over time, hence the name peace and support incremental PD. And naturally, this PD might lend itself to adding more and more pieces in the future, so it increments toward the transformational goals that we discussed earlier. The second type is what we called modest goal with support incremental PD. And this type does not have a transformational goal at all, or at least not one that's explicit to the teachers. This PD just has a modest goal, something small that the teachers can implement hopefully without too much difficulty. We depict this in the article by bringing the goal of the PD down to earth, actually bringing it down the figure, making it smaller and placing it lower in the visual model than the up-high, large, ambitious goal for transformational PD. And this type of incremental PD is modest goal with support. So there is still some substantial PD involvement and types of support offered to the teachers as they implement and reflect on those modest changes in their practice. Finally, the third type is the one that Xandra, Amber, and our PD team have been working on. It's called nudge-based incremental PD. And it completely removes the PD support. There's no training, no reflection prompts, actually no support at all for the teachers beyond the instructional nudges or small suggestions that we offer to the teachers. If you want to see examples of our one-page instructional nudges, you can find a bunch of them at our website, practicedrivenpd.com. In this nudge-based PD approach, teachers can voluntarily choose what they want to try out, and then the implementation, reflection, and the continuation are all practice-driven, not led by the PD. It may seem odd to remove PD support, but this is actually why we're interested in studying it, because this lack of support may be exactly what allows it to sustain and spread more easily than the transformational PD. What gets taken up easily can hopefully spread easily. And when teachers have the initiative and choice of what to take up, they may also have the initiative in passing it to others. But admittedly, the aim with nudge-based incremental PD is very modest. We will take the small wins, the smallest wins, where we can get them. As we move forward into the other articles from the special issue, most are about incremental PD, and you're welcome to think about how some of the studies might fit into one of these 3 types: peace and support, modest goal with support, or nudge-based incremental PD. But there's also a study of some innovative transformational PD with an eye toward what aspects of the transformational PD actually take hold and are taken up by the teachers. So that sheds some light on the notions of sustainability and spread. And also, Fran Arbaugh provides a commentary about the field of math teacher PD overall, and she shares some thoughts about these proposed incremental approaches. So let's hear Fran's perspective, and then we'll proceed from there into summaries of the other studies in the special issue from Education Sciences.
Hi, my name's Fran Arbaugh, and I authored the commentary titled Personal Transformations and the Possibilities of Incremental Progress in Mathematics Teacher Professional Development. When I first read the call for this special issue, I thought, I'm intrigued. Let me explain. For the entirety of my 28-year academic career, both as a graduate student and a university mathematics teacher educator, I've been driven by a passion to understand professional learning opportunities for mathematics teachers. I intentionally seek to link research and practice, engaging in what Boaler called use-inspired research. In my scholarship, I have identified problems of practice and designed research projects to develop and test possible solutions. This desire was born out of my own experience of shifting from a 100% chalk and talk high school mathematics teacher to one whose students work together solving problems The type of problems I would come to know can be classified as problems that require a high level of cognitive demand. How I started having them explore mathematical relationships, talk to each other about their mathematical thinking, and make mathematical connections across different representations. So after reading the call, I asked myself, was my own transition as a mathematics teacher transformational or incremental or both? And in my facilitation of PD, has my focus on transformational PD been effective? Did my approaches really lead to teachers transforming their mathematics instruction? This commentary is based in reflections on those two questions. In it, I briefly describe what I argue was the impetus of modern professional development practices for teachers of mathematics in the U.S., the 1989 NCTM Curriculum and Evaluation Standards. I then lead the reader through a personal reflection of my transformation as a mathematics teacher. Based on that reflection of personal change, I then reflect on my practices as a professional development provider. You see, I have faithfully followed recommendations stemming from the research, my own and others, about effective PD. I have designed, implemented, and studied PD experiences that were long-term, practice-based, and had an in-school support component. I was hoping to see major changes in the teaching of my PD participants, but for the majority of the teachers in my projects, I did not see major transformations in their teaching. So the concept of incremental PD leads me to wonder if I expected too much too soon. I end my commentary with a caution and a challenge for mathematics teacher educator practitioners and researchers. In the end, I know that our field has influenced thousands of mathematics teachers to improve their practices. But those improvements have focused on pockets of teachers, say in one school or one district. The tough love statement is that we have yet to have a widespread and sustainable impact on the teaching of mathematics in the U.S. My hope is that this commentary prompts personal reflections for you about your teaching transformations and PD practices. The writing of it surely did so for me.
This is Sam again, and I'm going to read a bit from the next study, which is entitled Teachers' Mixed Implementation of Mindset Mathematics Practices During and After a Novel Approach to Teacher Learning. And this is by Miriam Leshin, Tanya LaMar, and Joe Boaler. Here's their abstract. Supporting teachers to transfer their learnings from innovative professional development settings to the classroom is challenging. In this paper, we investigate a novel approach to teacher learning in which teachers from 7 U.S. districts taught in a mathematics summer camp using a research-based curriculum centered on student reasoning and mindset messages. We examined the practices teachers did and did not implement in their camp and school year classrooms, as well as the possible reasons for the greater or lesser changes in practice. Through analysis of classroom video, teacher artifacts, and teacher interviews, we found that teachers implemented several important practices in both camp and school year classrooms, namely posing open tasks, giving students ample time to collaborate, and asking questions that pushed students to reason. Interview analysis revealed that the act of centering students' reasoning and witnessing their subsequent engagement seemed to motivate teacher uptake of these practices. At the same time, however, teachers less frequently integrated mindset messaging directly into their teaching, and less frequently gave space for the exploration of students' mistakes and struggles. These findings suggest implications for innovative professional development efforts outside of the school year, as well as incremental approaches. And here are a few brief excerpts from their discussion section. The teachers in this study engaged in an unusual model of teacher learning that involved teaching a task-based curriculum designed by researchers, in an unusual setting of a summer camp, free from pressures of the regular school year. Through analysis of classroom video, timelines, and interviews, we found that teachers implemented several important practices in both their camp and school year classrooms, namely posing open tasks, giving students ample time to collaborate, and asking questions that push students to reason. Further, interview data suggested that it was teachers' witnessing of students' reasoning, rather than engaging in a coaching cycle or in a professional development session, that motivated these shifts. Teachers reported that they believed other teachers would shift their practice if they had the opportunity to teach in these ways and to observe students' high engagement and reasoning during open tasks. Although we found that several mindset mathematics practices were taken up, we also found that others were not. Teachers less frequently integrated mindset messaging directly into their teaching, and less frequently gave space for the exploration of students' mistakes and struggles. We hypothesized that it may have been easier for teachers to share growth mindset messages during the separate activity of showing a mindset video than to integrate those messages into their teaching, which requires shifts in potentially ingrained pedagogical habits, such as asking narrow questions. Further, we hypothesized that exploring mistakes and struggles may have been less familiar to teachers than practices like encouraging group work and emphasizing multiple perspectives. It may have been easier for teachers to implement these practices during camp, if they were already somewhat familiar with them, and to bring these practices into their school year classrooms if they were also reinforced by their school's curricula. Research has similarly shown that teachers are more likely to transfer their learning to the classroom when their school's systems and philosophies are aligned with those of the PD experience. And now this is Sam again, speaking for myself, just to say that I agree with that research, which shows that teachers' PD learning is more likely to be taken up when the PD is aligned with their school's systems and philosophies. But I feel like many professional developers and math scholars yearn for some alternative reality where the school system and philosophies change so that they are in alignment with our PD goals. But maybe it's more plausible to change our PD goals so that we align with the school system and the philosophies already in place, and then make some incremental changes from there. Change yourself rather than wishing others would change, so to speak. But let's keep going into the next article summary.
Hi, I'm Liza Bondurant, and the article that I wrote was entitled Incremental Growth Through Professional Learning Communities of Math Teachers Engaged in Action Research Projects. So my motivation for this study was rooted in the belief that continuous improvement is key to effective teaching. And I wanted to explore how engaging in action research could empower teachers to take charge of their own professional growth. So the goal was for teachers to examine their practices, identify areas that they wanted to improve, and implement small targeted interventions. I also wanted to explore how Professional Learning Community, or PLC, could support this work by offering a space where they could share experiences, receive feedback, and reflect together. So the study took place in a graduate level online math methods course that I taught for secondary math teachers. By embedding action research and PLCs into this course, I aim to provide relevant, practice-connected professional development with long-term potential, which is kind of unlike many traditional approaches to PD. So it was a 16-week course, and I did a qualitative case study. There were 6 secondary math teachers, 5 were alternate route, and 1 was traditional route. So for the first 8 weeks of the course, they read and discussed math pedagogy text. And then in the second half, they conducted individual action research projects using PDSA cycles, or Plan, Do, Study, Act. The main data source was their final action research reports. And I analyzed them thematically to identify the problem of practice, the intervention they designed, and their perceived outcomes. I also drew from their discussion posts and messages for triangulation. And you can see more details about my data collection and data analysis in the open access article. So findings showed that teachers tackled a range of classroom challenges, everything from student engagement to classroom management. And they also developed very context-specific incremental interventions. They often involved their students using a participatory design. And wonderful results were that all 6 perceived improvements in their practice or student outcomes, such as higher student engagement or improved assessment performance. And I believe that this study underscores the synergy between PLCs and action research, and the collaborative environment of the PLC helped the teachers persist, reflect, and adapt. And the incremental changes that they implemented proved very manageable and meaningful, because it helped empower them as change agents. Being part of this volume on incremental professional development is fitting. Our findings affirm that small teacher-driven changes can lead to sustained growth and a stronger culture of inquiry. Supporting teachers with structures like PLCs and a focus on action research holds a great promise for improving teacher learning.
Now I'd like to share a bit from the article by Allison Marzocchi, Amelia Stone-Johnstone, Kristen Kurianski, and Roberto Soto. Their article is called Supporting Mathematics Instructors' Transition to Equity-Minded Active Instruction Using a Community of Practice Framework. Here's their abstract. With evidence mounting on the benefits of equity-minded and active mathematics instruction, increasing numbers of mathematics faculty members are seeking to transform their instruction. Yet, many lack the skills or confidence to make the transition. To support faculty in meaningful instructional improvement, the authors of this paper facilitate frequent and innovative professional development guided by a community of practice framework. The PD is intentionally designed to be incremental and supportive. Using one-on-one interview data from 10 faculty participants who participated in PD on equity-minded and active mathematics instruction, we report on 3 crucial characteristics of a community of practice: the domain, the community, and the practice. Findings have implications for mathematics departments that aspire to support instructors to transform their teaching. Incremental PD, guided by a community of practice framework, could support faculty through the challenges of instructional transformation. Also, here's some text from their methods section, which describes the PD a bit more. The authors are the principal investigators of National Science Foundation-funded META, Mathematics Equity Through Teaching Actively grant, which strives to support faculty in the transition to equity-minded active mathematics instruction. The primary mechanism we use to support instructional transformation is faculty PD. Our PD offerings use innovative approaches to support incremental change. We strive to offer a variety of low-stakes and higher-stakes PD options. Lower-stakes options generally involve less of a time commitment and/or less accountability. Higher-stakes options generally involve a greater time commitment and more accountability. The following PD options were offered to participants during the time of this research: a learning management system, Canvas, strategy of the month, brown bag lunches, and workshops. And then here's a brief excerpt from their conclusion. Many participants reported ways in which the Meta PD aligned with crucial characteristics of communities of practice: the domain, the community, and the practice. Although there were some non-examples, participants' interview responses paint an overall picture of a community of faculty motivated by a common interest who learned from each other's expertise to create products to improve their teaching. The community of practice model may be enticing to departments. Rather than a costly high-stakes venture, effective PD can be local and grown by the faculty members themselves. And now the next article will be the final one that I'm summarizing. I'm going to read some excerpts from Holly Lynn Lee, Emily Thrasher, Gemma Mojica, Bruce Graham, Todd Lee, and Adrian Kuhlman. Their article is entitled Examining Teachers' Professional Learning in an Online Asynchronous System: Personalized Supports for Growth and Engagement in Learning to Teach Statistics and Data Science. Here's their abstract. Teachers' professional learning often includes online components. This study examined how a case of 37 teachers utilized a specific online asynchronous professional learning platform designed to support teachers' growth in learning to teach statistics and data science in secondary schools in the United States. The platform's features and learning materials were designed based on effective online learning designs, supports for self-guided learning, and research on the teaching and learning of statistics and data science. We paid particular attention to the features we designed into the platform to support self-regulation and personalizing the experiences to meet their preferred learning goals, such as allowing for free choice of learning materials, flexibility of when and how long to engage, providing personal recommendations based on user input, internal systems to track progress, and generating certificates of completion. In this study, we used a case study with both quantitative and qualitative data to examine whether teachers had gains in meeting learning goals related to their development of teaching statistics and data science, had sustained engagement, and found the features of personalization supportive for their learning. Results showed overall positive growth towards meeting learning goals and making small changes toward improved classroom practice. Most teachers were generally engaged in sustained ways across the study period, although we found 6 different patterns of completion that highlight ways in which teachers' goal-directed and self-regulated learning occurred within the busy schedules of educators. Several personalized features, especially the recommendations and tracking system, were highly utilized and perceived as supportive of teachers' learning. And now here are some excerpts from their discussion. We sought to answer 3 research questions using a case study of 37 secondary teachers, 78% of whom taught math or stats, who volunteered for a field test of the InStep professional learning platform. Related to research question 1, we saw evidence of incremental growth for our participants related to learning to teach statistics and data science. Our second research question focused on ways in which participants engaged with learning materials. Through analyses of page views and completion patterns, there was evidence that our case of users had overall sustained engagement in the InStep personalization platform. The third research question examined how personalization features supported users' professional learning within the platform. The personalization features that were considered most supportive were recommendations and tracking capabilities on the dashboard and within modules. These features are specific to supporting users in their navigation and choice of learning activities and seem to allow teachers to dive deeper into materials like extended resources that match their personal interests and needs. Our case study with a small number of users has shown that using an asynchronous approach to online professional learning for teachers can be effective in helping them meet professional growth goals that appear to lead to incremental changes in their confidence and their intent to implement new strategies or resources within their classroom. Now that the InStep platform is available to the public, we are very interested in expanding our research on teachers' engagement patterns and use of the recommendations with users who self-initiate their personal learning by voluntarily creating an account and choosing their own pathway.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Elliott, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a mathematics educator at Oregon State University.
And I'm Sarah Roberts, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm an associate professor of mathematics education at the University of California, Santa Barbara.
We're excited to share a few highlights from our paper, Studio as a Catalyst for Incremental and Ambitious Teacher Learning. This paper evolved from our interest in collaborating with each other and exploring how our individual professional learning studies could inform one another. Sarah, can you share a little bit about what motivated this work?
Sure. Our work was motivated by our collaborations, which first began in an AERA symposium on Studio alongside Kristen Lesseig. And after I was awarded an NSF career grant, and you joined my advisory board, and we have continued to learn from one another. And this call for the special issue had us thinking about our assumptions about teacher learning, professional development, and our commitments to disrupt educational inequities via ambitious teaching. So we wanted to think more about what we saw teachers working on in studio professional learning, which is an adaptation of lesson study, and how the studio model structures professional learning for facilitators and teachers. So we thought by comparing 2 studio adaptations, we could distill the commonalities between the models that we were using, as well as the structures and practices that supported an ambitious view of mathematics teaching and learning, as well as incremental opportunities for teacher learning to improve instruction.
I'm going to summarize a little bit for our listeners a little bit more. And to give an overview of our data analysis and findings, which are fully articulated in the paper, but just shortly here, we posed what Borko and colleagues called an important question, contributing a conceptual argument as opposed to an empirical paper for the field to consider. And our question was, how do studio structures and practices act as catalysts for the incremental learning of ambitious and equitable teaching? We addressed this question by discussing intentionally selected examples from our 2 studio studies. In these 2 settings, we use similar structures and practices. Beachside, which was from Sarah's study, and Mesa from my study, used repeated activity cycles, which means that they engaged in these repeated cycles of teacher observations, analysis, and reflection based on enacting a set of routines. At Beachside, participants used mathematics language routines to meet their multilingual learners' mathematics needs and language needs. And at Mesa, the facilitator designed data literacy routine was used to serve the school's D-tracked mathematics courses, integrating new and innovative content for their students. And although the two sites use different routines, they both involved ambitious and equitable pedagogies. Both routines provided students with opportunities to reason, explain their thinking, and solve mathematics tasks in ways that supported all students to use the authentic mathematical tools. While the routines supported different aims, both routines attended to language and math. Can you tell us a little bit more about the examples, Sarah?
Sure. The examples of Beachside and Mesa illustrated how the studio cycles and the use of a routine supported the studio members learning from one another through this shared representations of teaching, collective interpretations of teaching, and the subsequent opportunities to plan and teach using the routine. Further, by arguing that ambitious and equitable teaching happens through incremental teacher learning catalyzed by studio structures and practices, we offer an existence proof that ambitious teaching and incremental learning are not mutually exclusive constructs. Instead, incremental learning is a means for taking up ambitious and equitable teaching. So, Rebecca, could you just talk a little bit about the broader implications for the field?
Sure. I think in our paper, we really thought the implications of our argument contribute insights on framing practice-based professional learning opportunities. And we did so by unpacking studios' mechanisms that enhance teacher learning. These ideas are important for designers and facilitators of professional learning, and our paper suggests that not only are studio cycles critical for incremental learning of ambitious teaching, but routines explicitly focused on disrupting inequities are essential for the classroom-embedded professional learning models such as studio to catalyze teacher learning of ambitious and equitable teaching. Can you talk a little bit more about why we're in this special issue, Sarah?
Well, we invite listeners to read more about Beachside and Mesa's structures and practices, as well as our argument on how they were catalysts for incremental ambitious teacher learning, to hear more about the entire paper. And we're excited to be part of this volume on incremental professional learning with the other incredible authors.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's fun to write with you.
You too.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kristen Lesseig, and I'm a mathematics professor at Washington State University. And I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my colleague Jessica Hoppe about our article, Beyond Traditional Lesson Study, How Mathematics Studio Supports Generative Teacher Learning. The article is based on our work with a group of middle school math teachers across 3 years and reflects our attempts as researchers to uncover what made this professional learning experience, quote, the best professional development ever, according to participants. We start by describing our Math Studio professional development model and highlight what it has in common with traditional lesson study, as well as how it differs. Similar to lesson study, the centerpiece of Math Studio is the collective observation of a lesson as it's enacted in real time, and then a chance to immediately debrief that observation with colleagues. However, unlike traditional lesson study, in which a school or a district typically identifies a year-long focus area, each Math Studio centers on a current problem of practice that the studio teacher or their PLC group wants to investigate, and each studio stands alone and takes place in a single day. This adaptation allows for more flexibility, and the teacher's research question often drives the structure of the day. So for example, in one of the Year 1 studios, the studio teacher had been trying to implement more open-ended tasks, but they were struggling with how much scaffolding to provide. So we set up a studio that had us observing 2 of his 8th grade classes. He utilized the same math task in both classes, but we designed 2 different ways of launching the task. The launches provided different levels of support, and we were able to watch the impacts of that support on how students engaged in the task. In terms of our research, our broad goal was quite simply to identify what makes studio work. What were the specific features of the model that set up opportunities for generative teacher learning? Those could be structures, specific protocols that we had used, or facilitation practices. Like other papers in this special issue, we drew on Leshin and colleagues' concept of pedagogically productive talk as evidence of rich learning opportunities for teachers. We analyzed videos from 6 of the 13 studios across the 3 years. And we purposely zoomed in on dialogic exchanges in which teachers challenged ideas, engaged in evidence-based discussions, or made pedagogical rationales explicit. Our analysis revealed 3 discourse practices we feel are key to generative professional learning: adopting a research lens, utilizing the language of affordances and constraints, and maintaining a clear focus on students. So, that is your teaser. In the article, we flesh out each of these practices and provide multiple examples of studio discussions to illustrate what pedagogically productive talk looked like and sounded like. And we make the case for how Math Studio, an adaptive, teacher-directed form of professional learning, can lead to incremental changes in instruction.
Hi, I'm here to tell you about a paper titled Rough Draft Math as an Evolving Practice: Incremental Changes in Mathematics Teachers' Thinking and Instruction. My name is Mandy Jansen, and I'm a professor in the Math Education program in the School of Education at the University of Delaware. I also have a joint appointment in our Department of Mathematical Sciences. My collaborators on this paper are 2 doctoral candidates, and they're in our Learning Sciences specialization in the PhD program in the School of Education here at UD. And their names are Megan Botello and Elena Silla. Meg uses motivational theory in her research. She studies teaching and enactments of curriculum that motivates students to learn math. And her teaching experiences have focused both on teaching future teachers about human development and then also college students learning of mathematics. Elena Silla's research interests also around motivation, and she's interested in supporting students' experiences in math class with respect to their motivation and their sense of belonging. She's also interested in understanding and supporting students' development of their problem-solving strategies and their mathematical understanding. Elena is a former 4th grade teacher. I used to be a middle school math teacher. So this paper, it's actually not a traditional paper in the sense that it's not about one single study. Our paper includes results from 4 different analyses. And we were motivated to write this paper because we wanted to explore how mathematics teachers can increment their way toward integrating rough drafts and revising into math teaching. So we thought this special issue was a good context to explore different ways that teachers could gradually improve their teaching toward rough draft and revising in math teaching. So our first analysis, we investigated small changes in teachers' thinking. So teachers might learn from attending a conference presentation. That's kind of a small treatment to support teacher learning. So how does teachers' thinking shift after going to one conference session about rough draft math? Our data sources were exit tickets at the end of the conference presentation. The prompt was, "I used to think and now I think." And we analyzed hundreds of teachers' responses and documented 6 shifts in teachers' thinking from those responses. So one example is the fact that teachers would express new awareness that revising could be in math and not just language arts. The paper will discuss other shifts in teachers' thinking as well. Our second analysis is about findings of teachers who participated in a book study of rough draft math. So just like a conference presentation is a minimal intervention to support teachers' learning, a book study is a relatively minimal intervention as well. And so we investigated how teachers made small changes in their practice after reading a book I wrote called Rough Draft Math. So we interviewed teachers who have participated in book studies and documented some of the ways that they talked about changing their practice slightly. So one finding was that teachers would talk about small changes in their practice that integrated revising into math teaching. Sometimes they talked about revising as an event, a structured activity where students would try a problem more than once, document revisions in their thinking. And other times, teachers characterize revising as something more informal. I put students in groups because I hope they'll revise from talking to their peers. Our third analysis described a case study of a teacher who wanted to think about using their own textbooks or using their curriculum materials and small changes they would make to the lesson in the curriculum materials to integrate rough drafting and revising. So this teacher was using the illustrative math curriculum. And one example of a small change they made was when the materials suggested an activity to be worked in groups, the teacher made a slight change, like asking the students to come to a consensus as a group about their thinking. And the idea there was revising would need to happen if they all come to consensus. The fourth analysis was illustrating that if you are going to incrementally improve your practice to become aligned with drafting and revising, if you already hold certain motivations and beliefs that are aligning well with drafting and revising, you're more likely to be able to make some of these incremental shifts. And an overall conclusion from our piece is that we thought one reason why teachers were able to integrate rough drafting and revising to their teaching with small changes was because rough drafting and revising is an idea, and you can put it into practice a lot of different ways. So there's openness there for the teachers to decide what kinds of small practices work for them. Thank you, and we hope that you will read our article.
Hello, I'm Sarah Quebec Fuentes from Texas Christian University. In this excerpt, I'm going to discuss my article entitled S3D Approach Incremental Professional Development for Fostering Small Group Discourse. This work started with my dissertation. I was a high school mathematics teacher at the time, and I used action research to identify talk moves I could use to foster small group discourse. I discovered that I first need to examine the current small group discourse and then purposely choose talk moves that addressed a particular group's dynamics to effectively enhance the student talk. Based on these findings, I developed an incremental PD to support teachers who want to foster small group student-to-student discourse, or what I call the S3D approach. Although the overarching goal of developing productive small group discourse may be considered ambitious, the S3D approach is broken down so that teachers attend to various aspects of small group discourse individually and over time. In particular, the S3D approach consists of two phases. In phase one, the teacher assesses the current discourse of small groups through three lenses, one at a time: group dynamics, discourse quality, and teacher support. Teachers use what they learn from the three lenses of phase one as they move on to phase two. They set goals for groups, plan talk moves that align with each group's dynamics, implement the talk moves, and reflect on the impact of the talk moves. Additionally, tools support teachers' assessment at each phase or lens. The article includes paper and pencil versions of the tools, as well as a link to an app with the tools. In the article, I share the results of a qualitative case study in which I worked with one middle school mathematics teacher as she progressed through the S3D approach. I conducted once weekly observations of small group work in two of her 7th grade classes and debrief meetings during which the teacher shared her reflections, I provided feedback, and we made plans for the following week. Sam Otten and colleagues, in their 2022 PMENA proceedings, posited that incremental PD requires, quote, redefining success, rethinking the starting points for PD, and new mechanisms for sustainability and scaling. I will discuss the findings of the study in the context of these characteristics. First, rethinking starting points for PD. As I previously described, the PD was broken down into the two phases, with phase one having three lenses through which to examine the small group discourse. The teacher also engaged in this work with only two groups, what I call focus groups, one in each of the two classes. This allowed her to become familiar with the process on a much smaller scale. The tools also played multiple roles. They helped the teacher understand the intricacies of productive small group discourse, served as a means of documentation during lessons, and enabled more formalized reflection after lessons. Further, they provided a level of autonomy for the teacher with respect to making decisions about the pace through which she progressed through the phases. With respect to sustainability and scaling, the teacher engaged in the SQD approach each quarter with new groups. As the teacher became more familiar with the approach, she was able to move through the process more quickly. Over time, the teacher was able to implement the approach with groups other than the focus groups, as well as some of her other classes. The process and tools became integrated into her practice. Lastly, with respect to redefining success, in early conversations, the teacher expressed impatience and frustration with not seeing greater improvement in the small group discourse. She was not able to identify the incremental growth. Eventually, our discussions focused on the intricacies and improvement in the small group discourse based on the teacher's observations and reflections. Moving forward, a limitation of the current study is that it was conducted on such a small scale with one teacher supported by a mathematics teacher educator, raising questions about the scaling of the process. The SQD approach could be conducted with a greater number of teachers, either led by a mathematics teacher educator or independent of one. I've created a professional development guide as well as social media posts with videos about the various aspects of the approach and the associated tools. With such mechanisms in place, I wonder how one supports the expansion of the approach's reach. Also, future studies could examine how the approach is being implemented independent of a mathematics teacher educator. In summary, the current study demonstrates how, through a reframing of starting points and the definition of success, incremental PD supports sustainable changes in a teacher's practice and student engagement in productive mathematical discourse.
Hello, I'm Erica Litke from the University of Delaware. I'm talking today about an article I co-authored with Joni Wilson at University of Virginia and Heather Hill at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. Our article is titled Equity-Focused Rubric-Based Coaching, an Incremental Improvement Approach to Supporting Teachers to Shift Toward More Equitable Mathematics Instruction. We begin the article acknowledging that math classrooms have historically functioned as marginalizing spaces for many students. As a result, there is a critical need to consider how to support teachers to teach in ways that not only ensure students' mathematical success, but also affirm their mathematical and cultural identities. And that this is particularly important for students who've been historically marginalized by and within mathematics. One way to do this is through enacting culturally responsive and sustaining math teaching. But we know that this type of teaching isn't the norm in a lot of math classrooms, and that teachers face multiple barriers to its enactment. We were motivated by the idea that professional learning around equitable math teaching could take a more incremental improvement approach, building on teachers' current practice and supporting them to incorporate more equitable math teaching. We identified some key features of incremental improvement approaches from the literature. They're grounded in teachers' existing practice, they incorporate modest and actionable improvement goals, and they focus on specific teaching practices that accumulate over time. Rather than push for wholesale change, incremental approaches consider how that accumulation of smaller changes might build and bridge to more ambitious teaching goals. In our article, we illustrate how one model of math coaching both reflects features of incremental improvement and adds to our understanding of these types of approaches. In the article, we describe Hear Me Coaching, which we developed as part of a larger research project. Through Hear Me Coaching, coaches and teachers engage in cycles of video analysis grounded in an empirically validated set of classroom observation rubrics created by Joni Wilson, the Equity and Access Rubrics for Math Instruction, or EARMI. As a part of the model, coaches and teachers work collaboratively through cycles of goal setting, video analysis, and reflection. After setting their own improvement goals, teachers are introduced to the EARMI rubrics and pick one that they want to focus on. They engage in video analysis with their coach, both of clips from our project library and a video from their own classroom. Coaches and teachers then have a structured coaching conversation using routines that allow coaches and teachers to work together to what we call describe and elevate instruction in the video around the focal EARMI practice. We describe the model in depth in the article. Drawing on both the design of Hear Me Coaching and on interviews with participating teachers, We highlight how the model incorporates key features of incremental improvement approaches and as such supports small shifts to teaching practice, with a focus on what teachers themselves identified as supporting their instructional change. First, through the use of the IRMI rubrics, Hear Me coaching centers finer-grained practices, allowing coaches and teachers to develop a shared language and calibrate discussions of teaching to an external standard. The rubrics decompose the focal practices into component parts, providing specificity for conversations around instructional change. Furthermore, coaches and teachers focus on one IRMI practice at a time, allowing for deep focus on small manageable shifts. Teachers found the IRMI rubrics beneficial because they provided clear descriptors, they delineated key aspects of equitable teaching practices, and they provided clear guidance on enactment. Teachers talked about how the rubrics' specificity supported them to enact small but meaningful changes to their teaching, and highlighted how the rubrics' descriptors articulated clear indicators of how each practice might be enacted in greater depth, and this gave teachers an image of successful enactment and facilitated uptake. Another element that supported incremental improvement was the use of predictable, structured routines in coaching conversations. These routines allowed coaches and teachers to have targeted discussions around teaching improvements. The predictable and repeated structure allowed for these conversations to go into greater depth, and they held coaches and teachers accountable for discussing specific teaching practices, focusing the conversations on teaching. Rather than asking teachers to redesign lessons or enact wholesale changes to their teaching, the Describe and Elevate routine emphasized small adjustments to practice that teachers found relatively easy to implement. Hear Me coaching was designed to build from and deepen existing practice. Teachers began coaching cycles by identifying their own improvement goal, and coaches supported them to connect that goal to one of the IRMI rubrics. By integrating analysis of video clips from teachers' own classrooms into coaching conversations, instructional improvement conversations were situated in teachers' contexts. Teachers highlighted how these conversations in the analysis supported them to not only deepen their understanding of IRMI practices, but to think about how to enact them in their own classroom context. We invite you to read the article to learn some more about how teachers articulated the ways in which Hear Me coaching supported them to shift toward more equitable teaching practice. An important consideration is whether incremental approaches are appropriate for shifting teaching to be more equitable. Danny Martin and others have challenged us to consider if incremental changes are sufficient when there's such an urgent need to disrupt longstanding inequities in mathematics education. While the field must continue to push for culturally responsive and sustaining math teaching, we suggest that in addition, we support teachers to make these smaller shifts that move their practice toward more equitable instruction. And we argue that these smaller adjustments focused on equitable teaching practices can serve as an important first step in bridging between current practice and the types of math classrooms we hope for students, ones that are justice-focused and affirming of students' mathematical and cultural knowledge and identities.